So this is Andrew Thomas, everybody. It has been my pleasure and privilege to work with Andrew over the past year. He transferred in from Carroll Community College last year and has just done nothing but flatten us all with his amazing brain and his amazing character. Andrew is a man of faith, character, principle, and is really, really a smart guy, and has taught me stuff about medieval studies, and he can make his own chainmail. So, with that, Andrew Thomas.
All right. Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Buck and for being my advisor on this project, and the other members on my committee, Dr. Dodman and Dr. Driscoll. So I'm here today to tell you about a novel probably no one else in here has read. C.S. Lewis's That Hideous Strength. Has anybody else read this book? Yes. Okay. But I'm here to tell you how C.S. Lewis is using that book and using the idea of the siege to propose a change to early 1940s British identity. Now, when we think of British identity, it's fairly easy to think of the British Empire. This is Britannia that rules the waves. This is the massive world power. This is the country ordained by God to rule everything it touches. This idea of Britain comes into some problems with the start of World War II, because this is the reality he encounters. This is a picture of the Victoria Hotel falling after it had been bombed during the Blitz. And it became increasingly difficult to trust in the might of a Britannia, as the Germans proved time and time again that they were at least equals, if not a little more. You know, France was overrun, America slept across the Atlantic, and it seemed for all purposes that Britain was alone in its struggle against Germany. And it's through the novel That Hideous Strength that I think Lewis offers a new way and a more stable way to understand England. We're going to have to go through some background before we can understand the siege in That Hideous Strength. First we have to know a little bit about the siege and a little bit about King Arthur's realm, Loughborough. Now, when we think of a siege, a lot of the sieges most of us are familiar with are, this is the Siege of Helm's Deep from The Two Towers, and this is the Siege of Minas Tirith from The Return of the King. For all intents and purposes, they're the same thing. In both cases, the forces of good are trapped inside their fortification. The overwhelming powers of evil come and besiege them. Things are looking really bad, and at the last moment, a powerful external ally comes in and rescues them. A more realistic or historical siege would be the Siege of Antioch, which began in 1097, where the crusading forces of the First Crusade encircled this city, were starving to death. They did manage to bribe one of the guards, they took it over, and immediately were beset by a Turkish relief force that had come to rescue the previous siege. So, the siege trope, which is what we're calling this idea of the siege, is something of a combination of these two. This is the most concise example of the siege we get in That Hideous Strength. This is the moon. This is actually the cover of the book. This is Earth. This is the near side of the moon, and that's the far side of the moon. And what's going on the moon is a conflict between two cultures, one of which has become immortal through mechanical means, and they have cleaned their side of the moon. The other side are referred to as savages by the near side forces. One of the villains in the story describes the conflict as great wars. There are frontiers, fierce wars, and in the caves and galleries down below the surface. But the great race presses on. If you could see the other side, you would see year by year the clean rock, like this side of the moon, encroaching, the organic stain, all green and blue, mist growing smaller, like cleaning tarnished silver. Okay, so this image shows us a lot of what we need to know about the siege. First is the sharp division between the two sides. You can't go to one side or the other and not be in enemy territory. Also, with that division comes a division in roles. The near side forces of the moon are the ones attacking. the far side are the ones defending. They're not only attacking, they're winning by far. It's a steady march as the forces fall, and that's an important part of the siege, is that the besiegers are always vastly more powerful than the defending forces. Also, it's a siege not just about survival, it's about identity. The near side forces are cleaning the moon. They're making it their own. Yes, the far side people stand to lose their lives, but they also stand to lose who they are and all memory of who they were. The drive for this conflict is identity. Now, one element that is not captured in this image is the idea of the dawn. That's the moment when the siege, just as the defenders get ready to lose their lives to preserve who they are, a powerful external ally comes in and rescues them. This is, again, the Siege of Helm's Deep in Minas Tirith, where we have a cavalry charge that comes in and clears away the enemies just as the defenders are about to lose. Okay, so that's enough to go on for now. That's good background. I would summarize this book, but it's probably the best way to do that is read it. So I'll try, if we can have questions afterward, and if there are anything's confusing, I'll try and clear it up. But we also need to talk about how Logra, King Arthur's kingdom, is perceived as a kingdom under siege. There are many examples in the stories that I could describe, but the most concise example is written by Roger Lansing Green, who lived and wrote contemporaneously with C.S. Lewis. And he wrote about Logra that the evil was always breaking in to attack the good. It would need many books to tell of every adventure that befell during his reign. That brief period of light, set like a star in heaven in the midst of the dark ages. It might be a little simplistic for Logra, but it's a good example of how Logra and Camelot are this star surrounded by darkness, overmatched, and under attack all the time. Okay. Now, this is the siege, or sieges, as it's set up in that hideous strength. On the outside, we have the forces of the good Eldil, aka the angels in God. Then they are besieging Earth, which is fallen and corrupted and ruled by Tellus, also known as Satan, and his demons. Within Earth, Tellus and his forces are laying siege to the current court of Logra, which is an ally to the good Eldil. Also, we have one of the book's two protagonists, Mark, being beset by Tellus as well, but he's not actually part of Logra for most of the story. Now, this book also, the Logra in there is not exactly the same Logra. The book makes a very specific image of King Arthur's realm for its purposes. And one of the characters, when he talks about the subject, he says, when Logra really dominates Britain, when the goddess Reason, the divine clearness, is really enthroned in France, when the order of heaven is really followed in China, well then it will be spring. But meantime, our concern is with Logra. England, the book envisions England as a combination of two opposing sides. We have Logra, which is the good side, and Britain, which is the bad side. And England is the conflict between these two. Also, from this list, although it's short and by no means comprehensive, it shows us that Logra is a unique thing. There are other realms like it, but there's still only one Logra. To Lewis, King Arthur's realm is both uniquely English and very firmly Christian. The two are actually inseparable because Britain is just kind of the general corruption, and Britain is the geographic location of that corruption. Logra is a unique identity. Now, that hideous strength plays with the siege trope in some interesting ways. Normally, the defenders win. the outside edge of the siege, though, according to the novel and Christian beliefs, there is no doubt that God and the angels are going to win this fight. It just hasn't happened yet. And Lewis has constructed it this way to show us the might of that outside force without actually having to show us the conquering of Earth. Also, it focuses tightly on the individual and makes a mental siege in the case of Mark. In this book, the villains try to make Mark an inhuman and demonically possessed servant. He resists it, and so begins his mental siege. During this mental siege, he learns that to have a mentality of unwavering allegiance to his side, it allows him to drop internal divisions inside that side, and shows him that keeping the integrity of his identity is far more important than his life. The book spends a lot of time discussing this, and directly ties it to the Luftwaffe bombings in Britain. To show you an example of what I mean, this is a picture taken of London Influence. This is a bookstore, or it was. It's obviously not a very safe building. Who knows what other kind of structural damage has undergone. But these three men have decided that we still need to go about our routines and check out these books, read them, buy them. Their identity, who they are, and what they do every day is more important to them than their safety. And this means that the original readership of this book would understand what it meant to be under siege, what it meant to have a defender's identity, because Lewis is saying the Blitz mentality is a siege mentality. The most important change to the trope and that hideous strength is that it leaves out the dawn. The only siege to end, by the time this book ends, is Mark's. And Lagra is left waiting for the external siege to end so that its siege can end. And so Merlin, who features prominently in this book, who was awakened by God in order to help Lagra in his time of need, asks in a conversation with another character, "Has not our fair Lord made it a law for himself that he will not send down the powers to mend or mar this earth until the end of all things?" According to Merlin, there will be a time when angelic powers will cross into earth and mar Talos and mend everything that Talos has destroyed. But for right now, they're stuck in the siege. And this is also connected to the promised dawn in Arthurian legend, which is Arthur's tombstone, I'm going to try the Latin here. It's Hic jacet Arthurus Rex quondam Rex que futurus, which means here lies Arthur, king once and king to be. So both sieges have not ended because they have the dawn to look forward to. They're still waiting for it. And the dawn for both of them, because Lewis has connected Lagra through his own mythology to Christ, the dawn for both of them is the return of Christ. This is a couple of verses from the last chapter in Revelation. And this is Christ speaking. He's saying, "Behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to give to every man according as his work shall be. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star." He's the bright and morning star. He is the dawn. And the defenders can rest assured in him that though tough times may be present and ahead, they can rest assured that relief is coming. So Lewis is presenting to his readership a new model for identity. He's using connections to the Blitz mentality to help them understand that they already know what it's like to be under siege. And he's tying it to Lagra to provide them an image with a place that is as uniquely British as it is Christian. And finally, he's leaving out the dawn from his story so that his readers have something to look forward to. They can rest assured that as dark and as terrible as the times can get, they still have assured victory through Christ.
Any questions for Andrew? I have a question.
Yes.
Did he make an explicit connection with World War II in a biblical sense? Did he see that this actually was some part of a God's plan, this war with they were suffering?
He doesn't say that World War II is part of God's plan. He does seem to indicate that suffering in general is, but there are very direct references to World War II. One of the characters, when something drastic happens nearby, she says, if the war had still been on, I would have said that was a bomb. And various things like that. So it's set in a fictional post-war. This book was published in 1945. So it was being written during World War II. And it set in a fictional post-war Britain. And so the lingering wake of World War II is still very much present throughout the novel. Yes?
I wonder, Andrew, do you have any ideas about the island status of? I'm thinking about the sort of the connections you're making between Britishness and the siege mentality, and I'm just wondering if you feel that the island nature of the British Isles may have something to do with this, or and does the novel, in your view, play this up?
I would say yes. The novel doesn't say explicitly that islandness needs to, or that England needs to be an island to be under siege. But I think that does play a part.
One more.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with all of his work, obviously, I've read a little bit of it, but does C.S. Lewis have other stories where he does use the dawn, or is that a characteristic of his work, that there's the siege without the dawn?
He definitely, so if anyone's familiar with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Right.
there's that battle with the White Witch at the end. And just as the good forces of Narnia are about to be overrun, Aslan resurrects and brings in help and removes the evil forces and saves the day. So it's present there. Narnia also catalogs, it's like a parallel to the Bible, and it ends with something very much like Revelations, and you could say that that's the dawn for the entire Chronicles.
So he does use it.
He does use it.
Thank you very much.